Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Resolution from 2012. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you'd like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge to my Patreon, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this movie was selected by Will, because of course it was. Resolution is an ambitious, I would say definitely feels like an early film in a directorial career. Directors who want to accomplish a lot. And I don't know if necessarily everything in this film makes sense in terms of what it is as a horror film. But I think the kind of plot and everything they put into it makes it feel spooky enough that I don't fully question it or understand the full logic of it to question it. And I think that makes it kind of feel spookier and scarier under the veneer, I guess, of kind of not fully understanding, which not knowing is, of course, especially nowadays, seemingly terrifying. So Resolution is about two guys, Michael, who is a graphic designer, father-to-be, married and all that stuff, and he's, a working professional person, and he gets a disturbing video about his friend Chris, who's been a drug addict for a long time, is addicted to, I believe it's meth, and he gets a disturbing video and a map to where he is, so he decides to follow that map and find Chris, and decides to chain him up to a wall so he can get clean from meth, and hopefully that will help him become not addicted or will take him to rehab. And while Michael is there, because this is sort of like an Indian reservation kind of, I'm not exactly sure where, upstate New York, I don't know. Anyway, it's out in the woods and there's like a lot of open space, and he keeps finding weird things. After Chris shows him some weird photos he found, Michael starts looking through all this other material he finds, like film and an audio recording, things like that, and starts discovering what was going on in this place and how it eventually kind of comes back on them, and he hears and sees things that shouldn't exactly be there, while also dealing with his friend trying to be sober while he's chained up to a house. I would say Resolution has a lot of surprises because, as I've said before with the movie review vote, if I really haven't heard of a movie, I will not look up anything to have a more fun experience. One of the things I like about the review vote, and I know I've said it, is getting to review different stuff, which you guys seem to really really do. It's interesting. But in this, I thought at first, it's about addiction and him being tied to it, and him, maybe some other stuff according to it. But then it keeps going into these weird sections and keeps going into these weird avenues that you really do not expect. There's a certain part where he meets this weird French guy and hangs out in his trailer. Totally didn't expect that. And I do think this feels like somebody who, as a director, is directed by these two guys, Justin Benson and Aaron Scott Moorhead, who also directed a film I reviewed forever ago, Spring, which I did like a lot. Don't remember anyone in it, but I remember liking it. I remember the general plot. This does feel like someone who kind of thumbs their nose at wanting to do any sort of sense of genre or something like that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, in a way that they want to challenge you and they want to challenge themselves. And I got that a lot from this. This does feel like an ambitious, trying to be, but also is a ambitious kind of first feature, which I think, which I believe it's their first feature. If it's not a first, it's an early one where they want to play with the idea of the film. And they had the idea basically of being in this place for 7 days, but thus the addiction plot line was added. But I think a lot of this film has to do with actually, and since it's, these, I don't know how old these guys were, but a lot of this is early adulthood, change in your life, resolving things, as it's called, resolution, before you move on. I think everyone says of New Year's resolutions, and that seems to be the popular thing with the resolutions, which I was expecting this to be a romantic comedy starring Sarah Jessica Parker and Patrick Wilson, but I think the bigger resolutions where you come to points in your life where you have to grow up and you have to kind of solve, and well, not necessarily solve, but kind of have that sort of ending to certain chapters of your life. Whether you want it or not, it's going to happen, and you kind of know this is the time to do it, because you just might not have the time later. It might be 20 years and that window is closed or something like that. And I think you have that in early adulthood, specifically, I know for a fact, before you have kids. But in other parts of your life, you could be moving, you could, all sorts of, it doesn't have to be kids, honestly. You could be just getting married and you know that this is not going to go on. And I think Resolution has that within it, where you're still being like surreal and kind of like laid back in this film at the same time. It is a very interesting vibe that they're able to get in Resolution, which I actually really, really liked about this film. I think it was able to get on to a particular wavelength, but also do it in their own kind of weird way, I will say. I quite like it. Now, there's certain odder things about the film that, like, particularly how it plays with media and whatever entity is behind them, and that seemed to be the purpose of it. I've seen films try to do this and like try to ape, like, particularly Jaws. That seems to be the particular one. I don't think this film is aping Jaws at all. I think this film is its own weird self, basically. It's totally cool with being its own weird self. I'm like, hey, props to you, movie. I particularly like the performances of Peter Cicella and Vinnie Curring, and I thought they were both. Vinnie Curring is very charismatic. I was like, I would like to see him in more stuff. I don't know if I have. He seems sort of familiar, and it said he was in Spring, but I don't remember Spring that well. And I did like the performance of Bill Orbis Jr. as kind of the French guy that he does run into. That was a interesting scene. That was a cool one kind of scene sort of performance that I quite liked. In a sense, this film feels simple but opens up a lot of complex meta sort of narratives at the same time. I think like this film sort of is almost like fighting its own conclusion, which is a very interesting thing for a film to do, and in a way, like, understanding that what does that resolution ultimately mean, both for the characters and our even understanding of the characters. Do characters just end at the end of a film, or do they have life going on, or do you believe that life goes on after it, or do you not, and should a character fight against it? In a sense, it has more to do with, like, what was that Duck Amuck Looney Tunes short? It's just not as obvious about it, I guess. I think this is a kind of a film that a film student would really like, and I think a film lover would really like. I think most people would find this film too weird and strange, and that's honestly what I really like about it, because it is able to do different odder things with basically nothing, like being in the woods, being stuck in the woods with your friend who's addicted to drugs and stuff like that. It could just be a seedier, sadder kind of drama or something on what used to be IFC, and instead what you get is like this weirder kind of like self-discovery, and you almost wonder who is destroying themselves more, the friend Michael or Chris, who has been addicted to drugs this whole time. Like, did Michael, like, going on this journey, basically, like, is he destroying more of himself than Chris kind of ever could? Because, Chris had no real stakes to him, whereas Michael does have stakes, does have responsibilities, and he's kind of eschewing all this to, like, fuck around in the woods. And I often thought, like, well, who is, like, the real irresponsible one in all of this? I think, like, being addicted to drugs, the way he is, at least, but, I quite like this film. I think it is a really, really interesting, odd take of a movie. It's kind of one where you'd be like, oh, did you see Resolution? And I think most people would definitely remember this. Definitely remember this kind of strange thing. And it does make me, I'd only seen really one film by these guys, and I think this makes me more curious about them. I sort of see Will, who had told me about them before, has always, like, really liked these guys, and I was like, oh, I like Spring, but now I sort of get it more. They definitely have, like, a real deep vision going on as directors. They're definitely trying to mess with the form and ways, and something that, like, brings up a lot of thought-provoking things. If you get into, like, what's going on and how are they doing it and stuff, but it's sort of made to be mysterious and not totally make sense, and I kind of really love that about it. So Resolution was quite a weird motherfucker, but I was down to go down that journey with it. If you're down, I think you'll be able to find yourself in it, at least somewhere. So if you have seen Resolution and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.